Thank you very much, Chris. It's always a little intimidating when you stand waiting to come up on the stage and you see 40 people walk out. I don't know what I did to them. Maybe it's loo break time. I'm delighted to be here again. This is my second time speaking at this event. The first, I was very, very new. And when I look back at some of the things that I said, some of the things that I thought at the time, I'm a little bit overwhelmed by my bravado. We have it when we're new, don't we? 18 months in, I'm still very optimistic, and listening to Mike talk, I think I have reason to be. But I'm a little bit more bruised. I've got a few more scars than I had when I started. And I think I'm a bit more realistic about where we are and where we're going. I don't say that to say that I've lost hope. I've actually got as much as I had on the day I started in September 2022 in this rather intimidating job. But I know where we're headed with much greater clarity now. At that time, we had a sector obviously hurting. We had a sector that was dealing with public opprobrium. People did not like us. People did not think we meant well. People did not think that we cared about those people that Mike put up on the screen, even though it was very clear to me in a very short time that we did, and we had just lost control of that relationship. Now, here we are in 2024, and a lot has changed. I used, when I went on TV or radio, to get the first question always be a version of, "But you're all driving Maseratis, aren't you?" And I got sick to death of telling the joke, which was, well, if I'm on a list for one, I don't know how far up I am because I haven't got mine yet, but I don't see Maseratis in car parks of residential aged care facilities. People don't ask me that anymore. If you were listening to the media or you were anywhere near a TV last Tuesday, I apologise, you're probably sick to death of seeing my face. We got more media mentions last Tuesday than we had on any other single day, and as many as we would normally get in 6 months. And almost every single one of those conversations was framed around, how do we fix this problem? How do we help get out the message that aged care needs help? Not, you mean bastards, you're abusing older people, you're doing the wrong thing, you're spending taxpayers' money on things that you shouldn't be, etc., which was the tone of the conversation when I started in this job because of the Royal Commission and COVID. That was the sad reality of your day. That was the sad reality of your staff's days when they used to go to the barbecue and not want to admit which sector they worked in. That's changed. When the task force came out, a day etched in my memory, 10 p.m. last Monday, and the phone started to ring. All of the questions, bar one or two, and I'm talking like 100 stories, there might have been 2 that weren't like this. They were, how do we fix this problem? How do we make sure we've got an aged care sector that delivers for older people into the future? Not the opposite, which it would have been 2 years ago, and you all know it. You all lived through it. How big a change is that people now want to help us help older people, not criticise us for not doing better and not doing more. Take a moment to think about how landmark a transformation that is in a relatively short period of time. And it's because of you and all of your efforts. Yes, hopefully, I and my organisation have played a role. Having a single peak, a single voice talking about our sector and what it needs is critically important, and it has nudged the dial. But it's because of the behaviour of all of you. Your willingness to get behind us, your willingness to stick to that message. Last year, I coined, kind of off the top of my head, and it's been haunting me ever since, this phrase, one message, I can't even remember it, one message, many voices. This idea that, yes, we are consistent in our message. You can all deliver that message, but it's got to be a consistent message about older people, focused on the community, focused on the reason that we're all here. But then you can go out and you can spread that message, and you have been doing so. And you've been doing so in a positive and constructive way, and I thank you all for that, because it is the thing that has helped us. When I go and talk to politicians now, I get that same reaction as I got from our colleagues in the media. How can we help? Now, they don't love everything we do. You wouldn't expect them to. But on the whole, the reception is positive, and they want to know how they can help. We are now the solutions people. That's something else I said when I first started. I wanted us to be the solutions sector, not the complaining sector, not the, oh no, government's done it to us again sector, the here's how you fix it. Now, one of the things that's happening right at the moment is the Aged Care Act. If you can take a moment to read the ACCPA submission to the consultation on the Aged Care Act, you will see that it has pages and pages of specific recommendations, wording changes to that legislation that we think will deliver the things that the sector needs to make older people's lives better. It's not just, we don't like it. It's constructive and it's solutions focused. And because of that, the department are talking to us about those things, engaging with us on those things, and giving us the time of day, which is exactly what we need them to do. Now, last week was a fairly big week for us, all of us. We had the task force. We had a very significant announcement on Friday about pay rises for stage 3 of the work value case, which will see some people in the sector, and this was what got all the headlines, I don't think it should have done, some people in our sector, including the 15% last year, get 28.5%. I think that shows that we value the people who work in our sector. I don't think anybody can say again that we don't. Now, unfortunately, some people only get 3. And we, as a sector, are the ones who have to explain that to our workforce, and I know that will be really challenging. And in fact, when I put out my media release that said, this is great, but everybody who knows about language and neurolinguistics knows that everybody ignores everything before the sentence that comes before but. So I said, this is great, but. And I got a text from one of my colleagues in the union movement saying, you could have been a bit more supportive, couldn't you? I said, you're not the one that's got to explain that the cleaners get 7%, the admin staff get 3%, and it's only some personal care workers that get 28.5%, and that person did respond, fair enough. But that's the journey that we've got to go on now. And I'm absolutely confident that the government will fund it because they promised that they would. They funded the 15% last year. They will fund this. We will absolutely make sure that they do, but I'm confident that they will. But isn't that fantastic that we're actually talking about our staff now being paid based on the value they provide to society for the first time ever? That's fantastic. That's a brilliant place for us to be. Now, last Tuesday, when I did my, I don't know how many millions of interviews, starting at 6 o'clock in the morning with Sunrise, where they teased me about my jacket in the bit before you go live, so that really helped my confidence. It was a lovely jacket, I happen to say. I thought so, anyway. The only other sartorial advice I've had this week was from Mike, when I posted my thoughts at the end of an extremely long Tuesday, and he said, well done, congratulations, could have found a tie for the big day. Well, he's always beautifully outfitted in a tie, I shall have to dig mine out. But it was a fantastically, it was an enormous day for us. I then went to South Australia on the Wednesday for a pre-arranged tour around some facilities to visit some members, but I wanted to talk to older people. One of the things that I've discovered, and please take this as a hint, when I visit an aged care facility, people show me their master plan. They introduce me to their board. They might, if I'm lucky, give me some morning tea. They generally don't introduce me to residents. And we made very, very sure that in this tour last week, I got time to spend with residents and with people who receive our services, because I talk about them all the time. They're the people that we're here to serve and support, and yet I usually am sort of rushed past them very, very quickly. I don't know what they think I'm going to do, but I wanted to meet older people. And I did meet a few. Having been the most talked about story of the day before, I did wonder how it would go down. Because we are talking about asking people with means. We don't use the word wealth, because the minute we use the word wealth, people say, what's wealthy? I have been asked that question I don't know how many times. I don't know what wealthy is, that's for the government to decide, but people with means to pay more for their services. And I went to an activities group for some home care consumers in a town called Williamstown. Wirramena, and I was introduced to them and I explained what I did, and some of them said, what the hell's a chief executive and why are you here? Fair enough. And I explained why I was and why I wanted to hear what they had to say, and I could see this man in front of me, he was called Reg, grumbling, these bastards, what do they want, why is he here? And I thought, oh, this has gone down rather badly. It turned out it was Rog who had turned up late to the community group and always turned up late, and he was complaining about him because he knew he was going to walk in and ask questions about the thing he'd brought with him, which is I can only describe as a comedically shaped potato that he had grown in his garden. He was more worried about Rog than he was worried about me, so I escaped that one. But then when Rog sat down, he said, I saw you on the TV. Ah, did you? I have some thoughts about what you said. Oh, okay, and what are those? I agree with you. And that was the end of the conversation. We spent the rest of the time talking about his knobbly potato. That's the kind of feedback that I got on that visit. People understood it. People this is going to impact understood it and reacted positively towards it. Will everybody? No, of course not. I've also had the questions about how do you explain to someone who has wealth, who has worked all their lives, has collected investments, has put money into super, and tell them that they have to pay more towards their care when, as it was put to me by a shock jock, which I think is a little unfair, the person next door spent all of their money, had a brilliant old time, and will now get free care on the taxpayer. I don't actually think that's how it's going to play out. But those are the kinds of things we're going to have to answer. How do we deal with that fairness and equity? But my response to that is, this is not a decision about whether you pay more or not and continue to get good care. This is a discussion about whether you pay more or don't have aged care. We won't be here in 10 years, certainly not to the level that we need to be if we don't fix this funding situation. And we rejected a 1% levy on people's income because we thought it was unfair to increase intergenerational inequity, say that 3 times fast. When you've got a cost of living crisis, when you've got young people putting kids through school and they can't get on the housing ladder and they can't afford rentals, you're going to pay 1% extra for services you certainly won't receive for decades and you may never receive. That did not seem like a fair thing to do when we have the wealthiest generation of retirees in this nation's history coming through our system. Not all wealthy, but many wealthier than they have ever been. So people are accepting that, people are understanding it, and I think that's a really, really good thing. The last thing I'll say about the task force is you will read some of those recommendations and you will think, I don't like that, it shouldn't say that. One of the ones that's been brought up with me a number of times is the extra services, the additional services recommendation, and that people have to negotiate those after they've moved in. And there are people who are saying, how the hell are we going to do that? That's not how our model works. I'll give you that example to describe the broader point, which is there were 16 people around that table. There were a number of providers, Mike, myself, Grant, representing that kind of perspective of delivery and how it works. But we were not the majority, nor should we have been. There were also unions, there were consumers, there were older people, and there were other experts. And we got all of those recommendations agreed to by that group. Had we got everything we wanted, and were those recommendations like an ACCPA submission to a funding review, we would not have got 16 people to agree to them, and it would have been up to government to decide which side to take. So when you look at some of those recommendations and think, ooh, that's going to be a challenge, and the lawyers say, ooh, you're letting yourself in for a lot of risk and a lot of complexity, just remember, it's absolutely the best we could have got with the agreement of all of those different constituencies, and it's far better than we had any right to expect it to be. So hold your nose a little bit on some of those things that we don't like. We'll make sure when they're implemented as well as they possibly can be. That's our commitment to you. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about before it's time for coffee, and I definitely need one, is retirement living. I always think about this particular audience because you are a very broad mix of people who deliver all 3 of the service types that we represent: residential care, home-based care, and retirement living. I've been very grateful to Chris and the team at DCM for shining a light on a lot of the things that other publications are not interested in. I was particularly delighted to read an article about a seemingly uncontroversial decision that I made to put in place a team focused on retirement living within ACCPA. And I'll read you a quote from the story that was written. In other words, for the first time, the care sector is going hard to bring retirement village operators into their aged care focused tent. This was after the announcement that we had appointed a Director of Retirement Living and Seniors Housing, Mark Prosser. Many of you will know the Prosser name. Mark was our South Australian State Manager, and we gave him this role because he is an acknowledged national expert in retirement living. We hadn't realised we had loads of people in ACCPA who were working all the time on retirement living, but were in different teams. We have 7 or 8 people who do nothing but retirement living, and they were all over the place. So we created a single team led by Mark. We appointed another Mark Beresdecki, in our policy team to focus again entirely on policy in retirement living. The paragraph I love in the story, if I can find it, which of course now I won't be because you're all staring at me. We're bringing them into the tent for the first time. It says, is it also a grab by ACCPA for new fee-paying members, pulling in retirement village operators, or is it ACCPA looking to protect its aged care turf? I didn't realise I could do things in this job that created such breathless excitement. It's like days of our lives. What am I going to do next? Is Bob Don's brother, or who knows? The reality is we've been doing retirement living for years. We've just never talked about it. One of the things I inherited in this job, and I apologise in advance for it, is a name that talks only about care. It's such a terrible name, the Aged and Community Care Providers Association. It's so bad, they got it wrong on my lanyard, and it's an aged care event. They said ACCPA, which apparently is something to do with pharmacists. Maybe I'm one of those now. We have a name that doesn't talk about services to older people in its broadest sense. We have a name that talks about care. But we provide services to people who provide all of the things that you do in this room. We have 360 retirement living members. That's more than anybody else. We have 65% of the villages in the country in our membership. We are a retirement living peak body, but we've not talked about it. So the reason we put in place that team was to show very clearly that we are serious about accommodation, because we do talk about retirement villages, but there's also social housing. We're the only people who represent social housing for older people, affordable rental, and those other types of very important options for older people as they age to live in appropriate accommodation, fit for their point in their life. We are a representative of that sector, and we need to be much clearer about that. This is no shade on the RLC. We get on really well with the RLC. I spent a week in Singapore with Daniel Gannon last year at Aging Asia. We got on brilliantly. We have lots in common. This is about making it really clear we see ourselves as representing people who provide services to older people, whatever they are. And as Chris outlined earlier, if you don't have people like us talking about retirement living and the importance that it has, then you will not succeed as a sector, because it's only us that can say it's part of that spectrum of services. It's only us that can say to government, yes, you have to think about residential care, yes, you have to think about home-based care, but you have to think about accommodation and retirement living as well, and in the same breath. So that's, I love the article, Chris. I'm very happy for you to print more like it. I like a bit of excitement. My team thought it was brilliant, and very happy at any time to talk to anybody about retirement living, because it is a big part of what we do. But to end, I say, full circle, when I started 18 months ago, I knew it was a big job, but I had the exuberance of newness, and I thought it was going to be, I didn't say easy, but I thought it was going to be relatively straightforward because the problems were so obvious. It's taken 18 months to get us to a point where the community agrees, but we are now there, and we can change this sector. We can change it for the better, and we can change it, ultimately, for the benefit of the older people of today, but more importantly, the older people of 10 and 20 years into the future. And if that's not an important goal in life, then what's the bloody point? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. We are on time, but has anybody, it's a rare opportunity, does anybody have a question for Tom? No? Coffee beckons? Thank you very much. Can we show our appreciation? Okay, we have got basically back on time, so thank you very much, everybody. It's time for coffee. If we could be back in the auditorium at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much.
I lost my yellow basket, and if that girlie don't return it, don't know